Welcome into the Trevor Staub Show, episode number 44. Today we have a pretty cool guest. We've got Xander Kirby. Xander is the founder and the owner of Beacon Sports Management, which is a sports agency group that basically represents a bunch of top players, including Calvin Heimberg and Paul Ulibarri, for example. So we're going to get a little bit of insight today into what that sports agency world is like involved in disc golf, because I think a lot of people are interested to know that. And we're going to be able to get some really cool behind-the-scenes insight into what it's like signing disc golf contracts and negotiating with companies. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, we welcome on our guest for the show today. Today we have a very special guest. We have the owner and founder of Beacon Sports Management, Xander Kirby. Thank you so much for joining the show, Xander.
You're welcome, Trevor. Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to talk to you today, and hopefully we get some answers, right? We get some people have a lot of questions, and hopefully about agents and marketing and management and where disc golf is going. So hopefully we can find some places to talk for sure.
Yeah, I've wanted to have, it's been literally, I've had a year of this show, and I've wanted to have somebody from the sports agency side of disc golf since I started the show, and I reached out to a few different places and a few different firms, and I got, mixed answers, but I'm glad to finally have somebody on that can kind of bridge into this industry, because it's something that fascinates me. I have a sport management degree. It's what I did. It's something that I'm very interested in, and I love seeing how it's starting to apply itself to disc golf. So just to kind of set the stage for our viewers and our listeners, go ahead and introduce Beacon Sports just from a broad sense, just to start, and then just go ahead and name some of the players you represent as well to give some people some context.
So Beacon Sports is basically, your typical agency, so but with a twist. So contract negotiation, obviously, brand deal and management. So not only do we curate the deal, but we help manage the partnership. We do a lot of in-house marketing for not just ourselves, but some athletes. We help them with some graphics. We collaborate on posts, stuff like that. And then a lot of it comes from branding, like helping our athletes. So it's Beacon, our little phrase is lighting the way, helping them see the possibilities of what their brand and what their story. I mean, because marketing is just your story. If you have good marketing, it's just telling the story of yourself or your company so that people can join in on your process and what you're doing. And so we help curate a lot of that conversation and vision for some of our players. Some PR stuff too. So we help, kind of making sure that we don't have some PR nightmares or there's a lot of, especially this time of year, there's a lot of confusion and chaos. So making sure like the right thing is being said or not being said.
Yeah.
So, that's pretty much Beacon in a nutshell. And we represent, it changes because this is a new thing, but Calvin, Heimberg, Yuli, oh man, so many, Kyle Klein, Cynthia Ricciotti, Stacy Haas, there's Zach Melton is our player coordinator, which means he helps the players as like a mentor on our side, on the business side. But we have about 12, but I really could have 20. I mean, there's a lot of players that have reached out, and we are adding a couple new agents. That's something I've been working on for the last month. So we'll probably have up to 20 by the season, I would think.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. You certainly already have a pretty impressive lineup. And it's cool to see that you've been able to kind of get that reputation. But before we kind of dive into some of the more in-depth things regarding sport management agency, talk about your professional background aside from disc golf and kind of how that prepared you for this role.
Man, it's a pretty cool and bizarre story. I'm a man of faith, so I became a believer when I was 19 and played college baseball. That was kind of my background, is like the big travel baseball thing. I was kind of a part. I'm 30 now, so I was a part of the first ever travel team in South Carolina, actually.
Oh, wow.
So did that whole deal, had offers from a lot of schools, got a full ride to a Division II school named Newberry College that some people have probably heard of. They're a powerhouse football team now. And just my life changed in college, and I became interested in sport management and Bible, but I couldn't do Bible and sports management. I couldn't double major, and so I picked the Bible path, and I did sports management for a year. But anyway, so started doing that profession after college. Baseball career ended, and had a good career, but I was like, man, I want to throw things. Like, I throw baseball my whole life. And I happened to drive past this park near our college, like as I was pretty much leaving campus for the last time, and there was a 9-hole course.
Yeah.
And saw a disc, and next thing you know, like forehands are easy when you play baseball, right? So
Right. Yeah.
started playing disc golf and didn't really, know what was going on. The Pro Tour wasn't a thing yet. This was probably like 2015, 2016, whatever.
Okay.
So yeah, just started doing it with some friends and started my ministry path. Was in ministry for a couple years, and but I got married to my wife right out of college, so we were young and married and broke, right? And I looked at her and I was like, "This is never going to work, monetarily. Like, you're on salary. There's no way to earn bonuses in this. How do you have kids and all that stuff, right?"
Right.
And so my parents had owned a business for 35 years, and so business had always been on my radar. So I started my first business as a landscaping business, and had no idea, but I really knew marketing. Like marketing really made sense to me, and was able to have that grow. And I still have that today. It's a multi-million-dollar company now, and
Wow.
yeah, it's pretty cool. And so I learned a lot through owning that business. I have 20 employees there, and excuse me. So yeah, it's my background. And then a couple years ago, as marketing is really my passion, and I became kind of an influencer in the landscape space. So I started doing contract negotiation for myself
Okay.
with companies like Bobcat. You've probably heard of the big
Yeah.
ones, and all the landscape type companies that want to offer you products and money and stuff like that. So that's where I learned how to start negotiating contracts. Is these big companies would send me offers for landscape stuff. I speak at conferences and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah. So excuse me. So then a couple years ago, I wanted to start my second company, which is a marketing company, digital marketing company, and I had become okay at disc golf. I think I'm rated like 960 or something, and Yuli and I ran into each other at a C tier, basically.
Okay.
And I was like, hey, man, this is like right when he got on Jomez, I think,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
like 2020 sometime, like towards the end of 2020. I think he was on Jomez for that year, but like when it was starting to kind of blow up for him.
Right.
And I
Right.
was like, yeah, I'd love to like take you to lunch and talk to you about how great this could be and how fascinating it is for you. So we
Yeah.
went to lunch and we just kind of like talked about marketing and disc golf and where we think everything's headed. And I'm like, he was obviously, telling me a ton of information. And I said, man, I really think disc golf's about to just explode. Like we saw the bump, but 2021 was massive, obviously.
Yeah.
And and I was like, I think I could help. And so I started just becoming friends with Yuli. He ended up moving to Rock Hill, which is an hour and a half for me. So I live in Columbia, South Carolina, by the way, kind of like in the middle of Augusta, where Champions Cup is, and
Yeah. Yeah.
Winthrop. And so Yuli and I became buds and just kind of talked through marketing and stuff like that all year on and off. And then towards the end of the year, I was launching my marketing company, and I just was like, man, I can't believe, we had heard these big deals from Ricky and all this stuff. I was looking around, I was like, I can't believe there's not sports management companies for these players. Like,
Yeah.
who in the world is helping them curate these and making sure they're, nailed tight? We had heard about some people leaving that was like, wow, that seemed too easy. Like,
Right.
and so I just called Yuli one day, like towards the middle to end of 2021. I said, "Would this be something you think could really help players?" And he was like, "I do." And we've all talked about it. No one really knows where you go for that stuff like that. And so I started writing up Beacon, and I already had business experience. So yeah, that's really how it started. I started, writing up the business plan, and we launched, December 1st. But I would say I was getting it ready for 3 to 4 months.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that is quite the interesting journey there. It's really
Yeah.
cool how a landscaping company was able to like grow to the point where you got that experience creating those contracts and dealing with that. And that's definitely a unique transition, but it makes sense, and it's very cool that that's how that worked. So you mentioned you kind of got started. You saw that need in disc golf. You noticed like who's helping out these players. But when you first decided to kind of get things going, what were some of the early challenges getting things off the ground and getting it started?
Well, obviously, the biggest thing is disc golf is a small community, so
Yeah,
it's getting bigger on the national stage in some ways, but it's still really tight. I mean, this is one of the issues is there's not many companies. You look at the major leagues, there's 32 teams. The NBA's got over 30, right? In
yeah,
disc golf, Lone Star's starting to push into this number now. But
yeah.
there's 6 or 7 companies pretty much,
Right, right.
that have them had the money.
Yeah,
So that's not a huge amount of money for 100 MPO guys traveling full time and 40 ladies.
yeah,
And so getting access and getting understanding of where people are at. Yuli helped me in a couple times early, like, hey, this guy is the dude he says he is. Just even getting on the phone, like, who is this dude, right?
right.
Luckily, I've been playing some like local stuff, so I'd run into some players, local MPO stuff. It's just getting into the conversation is the hardest part.
Yeah,
And then education is the second hardest part. Players, the way contracts have been done for so long, and they still are sort of this way, some companies. Here's our offer. We're mailing them out November 1st. Take it or leave it kind of thing, right?
right. Yeah,
And so a lot of players were like, but what negotiation? Like, this is how it goes.
yeah,
I
yeah,
might get some more apparel money,
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
so educating some players on like doesn't have to be that way. Like
Right.
when you're in demand the way you are, and you bring this value that is massive, doesn't have to be that way. So beginning educating was a lot of the hardest part.
Yeah.
Still is one of the hardest parts because like a lot of people think, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but what does an agent even do?
Yeah.
Like that, I'll wait till we kind of get into that. But that was hard, and then obviously like navigating the Pro Tour stuff because not only do you have to create relationships with players, you then have to figure out the Pro Tour and where they're going and what they're trying to accomplish. Because at the end of the day, the Pro Tour is the vehicle that everybody's riding in right now.
Yeah.
There's not like Yuli has a funny tournament called the Yulibari Safari. It's not like it's paying out 50 G's to first place,
Right.
So the Pro Tour is a great, man. It's so amazing what they've done. But like, I need to understand how I can help my players navigate the Pro Tour because that season is a grind. And so I would say those are like the 3 main challenges in the beginning was kind of trying to navigate that.
Yeah. There's certainly a lot of learning curve when it comes to disc golf, especially when you're trying to apply professional experience and tools and precedent from other industries because disc golf is just starting to absorb that stuff. And for a long time, that inner core of the industry is very stubborn. There's a lot of people that are set in their ways. And I'm imagining some of the companies that you tried to even negotiate with probably stared at you like, what are you even talking about? But you obviously at this point you have been able to build a team with a lot of reputable players.
Yeah.
How are you able to build that reputation to attract those talents? Was that something you were kind of doing through word of mouth or reaching out or a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. I'd say 50-50 coin toss. I mean, at the end of the day, I am myself, and I take a lot of pride in being honest, transparent, and authentic. Those are kind of my 3 things. I don't have to. I'm doing this because I really want to help the industry, and I feel like this is a long-term thing for me. Meaning, we're going to be hopefully building a facility in a couple of years. Building and add other sports in over time. Because
Yeah.
I actually had a baseball player call me the other day, a professional baseball player, and
Oh, cool.
and I'm not doing that right now, but I think it's going to be a great thing if we can reach out to other sports because the hardest thing in disc golf right now is getting outside corporate sponsorship. We all know that's
Yeah.
the fact. And until that occurs on a regular basis, probably in the realm of 5 to 7 corporate sponsors, it's going to be difficult to scale. I mean, for the sports, it's going to be very difficult. And so, yeah, I would say half of it was from word of mouth and half of it was from me reaching out. I'm definitely a recruiter. I definitely was like, like with Calvin, I was like, man, I really can help you. Like,
Yeah.
drove to Florida, met with him, and Calvin's been awesome. Calvin has been an incredible person to work with. Kyle Klein, Cynthia, you name it. I've got a big team. Mason and Val and Alexis. So it's a little bit of both, But again, it's important for the players when they're traveling as much as they are, and they are trying to. I mean, it's Trevor, it is like so important to perform right now.
Oh yeah.
Is the elite series, man, they feel like championships like every week.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot that they're going through with travel and performance, that there's so many things that business wise that just fell to the side for many years, And as the sport's growing, it's getting even more important for them to do the business side well. So you mix those two things into a pot, and this is where agents and managers can really help for the players that see value in it.
Yeah. All right. So I want to give you opportunity now to talk about, a lot of people who are foreign to the idea of a sports agent.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Talk about just, what are you able to offer players that separates you from what they had before, essentially, which was just themselves, realistically. And this goes for everything you're doing on the contract end,
Sure.
to branding and social. Just talk about what is the agent doing for the player for
Sure.
Beacon Sports.
So I'll say like my agency and then myself, we bring different things because I have a team. I have a lawyer. I have a marketing person. I have an admin person. So what I bring is like market analysis, like making sure you understand this is what the market is saying. This is what a top FPO player is making. Here's how many, really understanding the data and analytics of the numbers first, because players always reach out to me like, I feel like I'm worth this. I'm like, where does that come from?
Right.
Well, I beat this person, I beat this player, and there's, it's a lot more than that. I mean, here's the biggest fact that a lot of players didn't understand maybe when I first talked to them, but they're way smarter about now. Like, they're so educated. So many players are so smart in the disc golf now, or lately, I guess I would say, is like if we're disc golf is a business that's product based. Mm-hmm. So like if you don't move product, it does not matter.
Yeah.
Like, literally, like
isn't that the truth?
Right? Like in the NBA, if Steph Curry wins the Warriors a championship, they make a lot of money because they sell more tickets. They're not product based. They have a lot of opportunities to get more billboards around. People want to advertise with the Warriors now because like all these things that
it's a lot less tangible.
Like it doesn't matter if his jersey sells.
Yeah.
Like he, by playing well, made the team a lot of money. This is not a team sport. Like Val Mandujano, when she wins 2 Elite Series, that doesn't necessarily do anything for her sponsor if the discs don't move with it.
Right.
So that is a massive challenge. Like there is no team component right now. I mean, I'm a little surprised we don't have a team tournament where like Innova and Dynamic and everybody, Latitude, pick their 4 best players and then they kind of go and win, and then there's a team championship. I think that would be pretty cool.
That would be
cool. But that's something that's a massive challenge, is getting players to understand it's 3 pieces. It's, are you marketable, meaning do people like you? Do they want to listen to what you have to say? Is your story compelling? The middle is performance, obviously, is important. And then the third is, can you sell, move product? I mean, you could be finishing 50th, but if you're selling and moving stuff, they're going to pay you like your top 5, period.
Oh, yeah.
So it's fascinating. I don't think people realize like how, I think a lot of people in the disc golf, like Reddit threads and stuff I read. God, that place is an abyss. So,
yeah, it is. There is quite a few people who don't yet understand that correlation, and we'll talk a little more about this later, but it is very black and white as far as you move plastic, you're valuable to the company, and that's the reason why you see certain contracts be what they are. It's not it's a lot less performance based than people think. And yeah, sure, that might not seem fair,
Yeah.
but that's just the nature of the sport.
Yeah, especially at least right now, like some of the deals we did this year, which I obviously can't like get too much into the specifics, but um, we got more guaranteed money, and I'll talk about why that's important because, again, I don't believe all the value is just in disc sales. I mean, one of the big pieces, like I had three pieces, I said, right? Like marketing. Like, would you rather pay a flag to be sitting on hole 16 with your logo on it, or would you rather be paying, Yuli to have that on the back of his shirt at everything he does? Well, so regardless if he's playing or not, that's important, and there's value there. For a long time, they were synonymous, is what I'm getting at. Like your marketing side plus your disc sale size. Well, they're actually opposite. I mean, you look at guys who are blowing up on YouTube right now. Yuli just did the Vlogmas, and it did really well. If he doesn't play any tournaments this year, he still holds a lot of value at Discraft. And we've seen this with Brody, right? Like, Brody's brought so many eyes to the sport because of his following and stuff. So if he doesn't play any tournaments at all, he has massive value marketing wise, regardless.
Oh yeah.
So, anyways.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to talk about, you mentioned earlier how when you first got into the sport, you just saw so many players getting essentially taken advantage of by the companies. I think this is kind of the climate that I saw in disc golf a lot. And even before agents were getting involved, I was kind of wondering, like, who's really looking out for the players? What do the contracts look like?
Yeah.
Do you feel like that was a big issue prior, and then do you feel like it's still happening a lot nowadays, or is it kind of slowly getting eradicated as the players are starting to realize and see what's happening around them?
Do I think the players are taken advantage of?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that there was no real rhyme or reason for why companies were offering XYZ to a player, except this is what we're willing and what we've always done, and we know they'll take it.
Yeah.
And so I think that is being eradicated fairly quickly. Now that there's some agents in the game and we have a lot more information, we know what X player is making and Y player, and we know that this is kind of the baseline market value. I think from a lot of the conversations I've had with players, our players and other players, because I have great relationships with players that don't work with us. For a long time, it was like this mystery box of like, I have no idea what someone's making. Let me pull it out, and like that sounds good, right?
Right.
And we heard these numbers being said. I heard a number this year, and I'm not going to say what it is, but like there was a number that came out last off season that apparently wasn't even close to the real number that this person got. It was all a marketing thing. So like, there's a lot. Like for me, I refuse to allow our players. I refuse to allow. That's not the right word. I don't want anything but honesty coming out of the Beacon camp.
Yeah.
Because this is such a fresh industry, or fresh part of the industry. Excuse me, and like not every player is going to be a good fit with me. I get it. Like I'm not saying that either, but for me, from coming out of our side, honesty and transparency. But yes, I definitely think players. Like I said, there's some companies that just have a standard contract and then they send a number out and the players are like, "What? I can't even travel on this,"
Yeah.
And I think that Trevor is like one of the bigger problems is there's no like developmental system right now, right? So
Yeah.
where's a player who can't afford to tour but has a lot of talent? How are they supposed to do something in order to get to their dream in the meantime?
Yeah, it is very tricky.
If the sponsor's not going to give them but $500 stipend a month.
Yeah.
I mean, the gas bills that I've heard from some of our players last year was in like 5 figures, So it's like, how are they supposed to do this? It's hard. It's not it's sort of not viable. I remember, Trevor, do you remember? I remember thinking this last year. I went to Vegas last year, and Drew won, right? And I think he won like, what was first place? It was like $6,000 to $7,000, right? It was.
Yeah, probably in that range.
And I was thinking to myself, we were here 5 days. Like I was here. It was a 4-day tournament. I was here 5 days, but they were here a lot longer. You just do basic hotels and flights, like he might have broke even,
Right.
after
Yeah.
after taxes. And I'm like, that's crazy, So we still got a long way to go, but I think the ceiling is really high.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I think purses are certainly one area that is still looking to improve. It seems to be lagging behind a little bit when it comes to player earnings. I wanted to kind of walk through sort of a typical contract negotiation, just kind of get a little more in depth into what it would look like. So I feel like we could use Calvin's, recent extension with Innova as an example. Obviously,
Yeah.
you don't need to get into the details
Sure.
monetarily, but just kind of walk me through step by step how that all went down. What's the step by step of that to give people an idea of what that
Yeah.
looks like in disc golf now.
So I believe in starting negotiations a lot sooner than companies have done in the past.
Hmm.
Again, just trying to help the audience understand, like, how much sense does what this make? You go into the last 6 or 8 weeks of the season, and you've got Worlds, you've got playoffs, you've got Worlds was the first, USDGC, and then you've got Pro Tour Championship.
Yeah,
So for the longest time, there's 95% of players have no idea where they're going to play next year going into like the 6 biggest tournaments.
true. Yeah,
And then the season's over and they're like, okay, what do I do now? So I don't think that's like, personally, I don't feel like that's really fair to the players. So I was like, okay, with Calvin, we know Calvin's, a top 5 player. And so we started talking to Innova and other companies May/June.
Oh wow.
Early, and it's not like in-depth contract negotiations at that point, but we're understanding, is there mutual understanding of where we want this deal to go, what would that look like, let's draw some scenarios out on the board. So I'd say, like, we started kicking the tires on that May.
Wow. Yeah.
um, and obviously he had every company interested. Obviously there were 2, 3 that came out with large offers for him. And at the end, so anyways, we got into later in the season when he won D-Glow. When was that? Like June, July,
Somewhere in that range. Yeah.
on the range. We were getting close, and because for me, I advised Calvin, and Calvin agreed that, like, don't go into Worlds and don't go into. People can start looking back at how well he performed towards the end of the season. I think this helped him. Let's
Right.
have this, if we can have this kind of wrapped up before Worlds, and obviously put some clauses in. If you win Worlds, then the deal changes or is enhanced and stuff. But
Yeah.
you can play freely and not have to worry about that.
It's true. Playing
I
in a
thought-
contract year can be tough.
Yeah, especially especially with Calvin had not gotten a large deal. He had been playing and grinding for a while.
Yeah.
Like, this was his big moment,
Hmm.
And so we kind of wrapped that up, around then. And he played great. Look at what he did, USDGC Worlds. Like, I just think there's a lot of benefit to that. You don't like players when they hit the off season, they don't want to talk for a month,
Yeah,
So,
they're ready
like,
to take a break.
yeah, and then having to learn a whole new bag in basically 90 days, it's not a great recipe either, So we had that kind of worked out, and Innova made a commitment that they had usually not done. And Joe Rotan, the team manager there, is who I talk to a lot to give people. A lot of the companies have a team manager who's kind of acts as either the decision maker or has some type of power, and then takes it to the owner.
Yeah.
I'd say it's about half and half of the companies that I work with. I'd work with everybody, but Joe's been in the game a long time. Joe's a super professional guy, super professional. He cuts right to the chase. He's not a fabricator. So we talked with Joe, and then, like, another company that we were working with, it was directly the owner. So, like, it just it changes from company to company, from structure to structure.
Yeah, I mean, I saw when I had seen that he had extended for such a long period of time with Innova, I knew you must have got him paid because, Innova in the past, they obviously have signed some big players and had some pretty lucrative deals. I've heard some details in the past, but they're notoriously a little stingy, and they definitely are prideful in who they are as a company and their success, and know that they don't need to rely solely on players. So when I saw that big extension, I was like, okay, Innova, they must have stepped up and paid him, and I was happy to see that he was able to extend with them, because I think he's becoming synonymous with that brand, and that's always good for a player.
That was definitely one of the key things. Was something I tell players is like, you guys mentioned this on your podcast the other day. I listened to it getting ready for this, but it's better to stay with a company and make one big jump than jump every year.
Right.
And I heard Brody and Hunter mention that, and I couldn't agree more. Like, being synonymous and having a real story with a company is better, in theory, better. It doesn't always work that way, but it's better for you. And for Calvin, I don't want to speak for Calvin, but he wanted to have that legacy, was a part of it, but it definitely did. Mm-hmm. I've seen this online a lot. It's like, oh, he must have taken a hometown discount. It's like, no, like that. Yeah. That's never going to be a thing. We're never going to fight over 5%, right? Like, but there's no chance that, like, my players, like, they have when I say my players, anyone who ever works with me at Beacon and our other agents that are coming on board, you're going to get your value, man. Like, you don't have a long career in this. You don't know, you're one throw away from being hurt. You can't take discounts because you're friends with somebody. You know? Now you can take some steps to make it a little bit easier because they bring other value that's outside of compensation. Like, with Calvin, he got to design the Toro with Dave. And that has gone incredibly well. So, like, what value do you put on that in the future of new discs that he gets to be a part of? There's no monetary necessarily value for that type of experience and potential things down the road. So that, going kind of back, like, one thing I think through, I have a big board in my office. I think through as many scenarios futuristically as possible with our players. So I go, here's where you're at, here's where we want to get you destination-wise, and here's where you want to be. Because at the end of the day, Trevor, right, it's about what you feel good about.
Yeah.
Like, money is not the number one choice. It should never be, because money comes and goes. It burns. You can spend it quickly. It should be about monetary. It should be about fit, and then it should be about where you feel comfortable. And so it's a mix of those three.
Yeah. That's definitely a cool look into it and good perspective, and it's cool to get that insight. So since you're so involved in the contract world of disc golf, and I think that it's kind of just a hot topic right now, something we speculate a lot about and try to get as much in depth into it, I wanted to ask you a few questions. First, and this is one that I've been asking a lot of people lately, is, we saw this hyperinflation in disc golf contracts, and most of that due to, it starts with Paul getting that deal.
Yeah.
10 years, $10 million. And this goes back to what you said before, and a lot of people don't understand, is a lot of that deal is due to the fact that Paul moves plastic like no other human being on the planet. Yeah. And the PM line is incredibly successful, so that deal becomes lucrative for Discraft and makes sense. But because of that deal and because it goes public, all of a sudden numbers start getting thrown out there. Yeah. And then you see Christian Tatar signs a big deal and it goes public. Ricky, they match up the Paul deal essentially $1 million a year. Yeah. So with all this going on, and because of that disconnect with the disc moving, kind of structure, do you think that contracts are inflating a little bit too quickly, and then it's going to come back to bite some companies potentially?
I guess a question I'll ask you back, and I was hoping we kind of get back in the back and forth side. This is a little fun for people, I think. What other contracts do we even know about that are even close to that? So meaning, like, why is everybody panicking about inflation when there's only a handful of numbers known and none of the rest, like, there are only 4 or 5 people that we know of that have massive numbers?
Yeah, I think it's, for me, on the retail side of thing, as somebody who sees the disc move, I it comes down to where's the money coming from companies? Because there are some companies, like I believe that Latitude 64, for example, I believe that Latitude 64 is kind of a wagon in the disc golf industry. I think people don't realize how big they are. They have a parent company. They own a lot of other companies. And when they commit $500,000 to Kristen Tatar, that might just be coming from their bank account. They might not be. They might be saying to Kristen,
You think they're taking
out there. What?
You think they're taking an L?
No, I'm just saying that they might just be able to say that, Kristen, you just keep going out there and winning. You're worth this to us. You don't need to move plastic. Because the bottom line is, if they're paying a player like Kristen $500,000 and they're saying we need you to move $500,000 worth of plastic over those years that's going to supplement this contract, I don't know. It's tough. It's tough to say. It's tough to say how much certain players are making. And then I see a few other deals, because what happened was, signature discs. It's no shock that the market has become oversaturated.
Yeah, everybody had a disc with their name on it.
Right, and that is because we've seen the contracts are going up. I think companies were looking for ways to get more money to the players.
Yeah.
So they're making discs, and then we're seeing them sit a little longer. I don't want to be dragging players through the mud, but I've seen a few contracts that the numbers have been public, where I've heard the numbers, and then I see their discs sitting on websites, and I'm thinking,
no way. Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, are the companies, was this their plan, and are they in trouble, or did they have the money set aside? Are they cash rich and they're just thinking
I definitely don't think they were willing to eat the deal for some reason.
Yeah.
For example, let's do the math on Kristen. She got guaranteed, from what we know, 125 years. Does that sound right?
Right. Yeah.
That's 11,000 discs at $9 a disc. I've heard around $8 to $10 is what manufacturers make on the sale of a disc. Then you add $3 or $4 onto the top of her signature, so they make even more. They really pass that to Kristen most of the time, right? It's just a pass from the consumer to Kristen. The company doesn't touch the extra. What, she has to sell 11,000 discs to break even?
A lot of plastic.
Yeah, but for Kristen Tatar, is that a lot of plastic for her royal stuff that she has? I mean, when she wins Worlds, you don't think she sold 4,000 or 5,000 discs that week?
It's tough to say. I mean, I'd like to think that she is, and it's tough because I think that the retailers are buying from the manufacturers, but I see what discs go off our shelves, and I think that there is certain players have correlation wins to sales, like you mentioned before, like performance to sales. Certain players have that, but I think it's a lot less than people think. I'll give you an example.
Give me one.
When James Conrad won Worlds with the shot, everybody bought just loads of the commemorative envies for that shot. Those discs, you can go into a lot of stores and they're still sitting on the shelves.
Dang.
People over gambled on a lot of that because I think that they assume a correlation that for some players it just isn't there, and so I think that's where the danger is I think that some companies might have just overdone it, and I might be completely wrong, and maybe they all are selling more than I think, but I think that there are just less players that have that just undeniable ability to move discs than maybe people think there is, and and Paul Macbeth is an anomaly.
Sure. I definitely agree. I think every company's looking for their version of that, right? They're looking for which player can be our golden goose, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's as inflated. I mean, I definitely think it's top heavy is what I'm trying to get at. I think maybe some of the big contracts are really bad, but I don't think it's like a ton of players is what I'm getting at. I think Kristen's worth every penny, I'm guaranteeing. Now, the thing that we don't see is in Europe, I know this from Prodigy, they are massive in Europe.
Right, yeah.
And so everybody in America, has I talk to retailers, with our players, and they're like, XYZ company doesn't sell well. Where it's bizarre because on the other side of the world, they sell the best.
Yeah.
So, there's some things that we don't think about with that. But I definitely think that I don't think contracts for the most part have been overinflated. There's a couple bad ones, There's definitely a couple bad ones. But here's what's interesting: it's not the player's fault. Like
It's true. It's not the player. No, it's never the player's fault.
no, the companies are. Some companies, and I got to be careful here, but like are really, really, really good at marketing.
Yeah.
It's no secret that Discraft and Discmania are incredible.
Yeah. Very good.
At it, right? Then some companies are simply not good at it. And if you're not going to have a marketing plan around this disc drop and how you're going to enhance the player throughout the year, like I think about this all the time. When a player throws one of the greatest shots of the year and that doesn't get talked about on a week for their social media, like this disc, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, man, what a missed opportunity,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that there's just not a lot of like focus to me on how to tell the story of this player with these discs. Sometimes it's like, well, you guys do this all the time on Foundation. It's like, well, we're going to switch bags and we're going to switch plastic and we're going to do this for a month, right? It's like,
right.
Which is fun, but for players, like it should be, no, I can't go without this disc, and here's why. And companies should really tell that story of the disc better than I think they have.
Yeah, I think that I think you're right. And like you said, the players are certainly not at fault here. If anybody's ever going to be at fault, it's the company, because at the end of the day, it is their job to set how they want to utilize the player and set those responsibilities within the contract. This is what we want from you. So the players have been doing. I'm happy for the players. I think it's great. I think it's fantastic to see all these big contracts. I'm just be interested to see as things kind of settle and the sport settles back into a normal growth pattern. How things will shake up, and I think your players are still shifting around, a ton right now. There's not too many players that are locking themselves down for a long time. People are right now more than ever exploring their options in free agency, and you see people going the mixed bag route a lot. There's just all kinds of new possibilities being explored. But one thing I want to talk about with all this happening and all the movement in the offseason is the age we've kind of come into where somebody like me is able to know about contracts because some of them are being made public. And then also there are some things that are being leaked. We get messages all the time from people that are, telling us things, Instagram DMs, people sending us pictures. Oh, look, here's so-and-so using this disc out on our local course.
I bet
first thing I want to,
gosh, I bet that I would love to be a fly on the wall reading all those.
Yeah. So my first question would be, what do you think are the pros and cons of contract information, years, money being made available to the public?
I personally think it should all be out there.
Okay.
One, it brings legitimacy to the sport. Two, a random person that works at Under Armour might see it and go, man, there's some money to be had in disc golf.
Yeah.
I think that's never, when you're in the news, there was did you see that video going around from the bowler Pete Weber?
Yeah.
And he said, and he has the best quote. He says, "Love me or hate me, you watched," right?
Yeah.
I think that's part of what disc golf needs to embrace. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we need eyes on the sport, and now it doesn't need to be ugly. I'm not saying it needs to be like something bad, but whether you think this or that, like, we need people to know that this is legit. That there's real professions, there's real jobs, there's real opportunity in the sport for the big boys to come in and play, right? And so contract numbers only can help that. Now, I understand as a person who talks to all these team managers and owners consistently, I understand why they don't want the numbers to get out. Because if you pay one player this and the other player's on a terrible deal, he's going to call the second it gets announced to be like, I want to renegotiate.
Right.
Or worse, he's offended and doesn't want to answer your call and just says, I'm going somewhere else.
Yeah.
The other problem is, a lot of companies don't want to share like how many discs a player sells. Did you know that, Trevor?
Yeah. I have heard that.
They don't want to share, and a lot of players like get frustrated. I know exactly why they don't want to, because if they send you a report every quarter and you sold 60,000 discs, and you take that to the competitor and say, look at the value I could bring you. I sold, $2 million worth of plastic. Then they just use that as ammo to leave you. So I think it's good. I think the bigger question, Trevor, is like, is there going to be some type of commitment that, like free agency? What is free agency? I mean, people are talking and calling companies all the time. One player that I worked with this year, the second they got off the course after a win, I got 3 calls about them, and they weren't technically, they're not a free agent, and I'm like, hey, they're signed, like,
right.
but like, this is known, like everybody sort of meddles in the pot, so to speak. It's trying to change. I know one company is the contract. They just went through a huge redo of their contracts to make it super legit, and lock and key, so to speak, because they don't want that to happen anymore. But the fact is, until there's like, I don't like unions, but until there's like an agreement within the industry of like, here's when free agency starts and here's what the rule. There's no rules. Like, we don't have a MLB, players union. We don't have an organization. The Pro Tour is a tour. It's not necessarily like an organization. So so there's kind of like, that's something frustrating for me is I don't really know what the rules are. I mean, if I sign an NDA, which I do all the time, yet that owner or team manager goes and talks to another owner and team manager and they say it to each other, I'm like, how's that right?
Yeah.
So it's just bizarre, and that's just an example, but I wish there was some uniformity and some like mutual understanding to make it a little bit easier, because then players don't know if you're telling the truth to them, right? They're like, well, they heard this from, I'm like that. Yeah, there's just a lot of back and forth and like whispering,
Right. Yeah. It's the Wild West of disc golf, and it's just information just flies around, and it's crazy how, like, I'm sure you've already had to deal with this. Like, trying to keep information suppressed is nearly impossible. I mean, we had the situation last year where, like, people were getting upset at us for releasing information about deals that was given to us, and with no, like, if somebody tells us something and says, hey, don't tweet this, well, of course we're not going to tweet. Like, we're not that, nobody would ever tell us anything again. Like, we're never going to be that people. But if we're given it from a source who has no tie to, like, or no obligation to keep it a secret, well, then guess what? It's free information. The people deserve to know it at that point. So have you dealt with that frustration at all, trying to keep things under wrap?
Gosh, I mean, like I said, we signed Calvin's deal like a couple months before it was announced, and like, that was hard to suppress. I mean, I don't know how Innova did a great job of keeping it on the low. They really wanted to keep it on the low to announce it at the right time, and get all their ducks in a row. It's super hard. I mean, I get people all the time reaching out to me, asking me questions, and I'm like, I can't speak on that. And then I have to call somebody and be like, do you want to comment on that,
Right.
Because I guess the hardest thing is knowing, like, what's the win. Like, for a media company, I understand. But why would the player or why would the company let it leak? I don't really get that. It takes the wind out of the sails. But, again, disc golf is small. I mean, I'm sure, like, when Ricky and Kona flew in to get on that helicopter, I mean, how big of a secret can you keep that for a while?
Yeah.
So anyways, I don't know. It's definitely tough to keep information down, because then you don't want another company using that as leverage, so to speak.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. It depends on, disc golf companies. I do think disc golf companies definitely love having the power of the announcement, it seems like. So a lot of them really don't like information getting out, but I think there is pluses and minuses to doing it the right way. Because, like, obviously, like, Dynamic, for example, they love the idea of having a helicopter and this big announcement video, and they want it all to drop on their terms, right? Like, that was their whole plan. And, like, sure, like, there's room for that, but I think that a more powerful way to announce a player contract is to strategically leak something. Sure. So you don't say, okay, let's say, let's just say, for example, Ricky Wysocki, we'll use his contract as a deal. You don't have the entire contract get leaked, but you slowly siphon it out and you give it to the right people and you let them, because now instead of one big boom, people are talking about you
For a month.
for months.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that nobody is really utilizing enough, because if you give information to somebody like me or Hunter, somebody with a Twitter following that can get the disc golf Twitter sphere, going a little bit, we'll leak that out at whatever pace that somebody wants, and we'll help. It kind of helps create a story for the off season. It's good for the fans because it gives you something to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And then, you could take a player who's a mid-range player, but if they have an interesting story going and we're slowly getting more information here and here, and then there's a twist or whatever,
Sure.
It's great. It's great storylines. And, when you finally do get that announcement, it's not going to change. There might be a little less shock value, I suppose.
Sure.
But I think it's much more exciting. So I'll be curious to see how companies slowly adapt to that, because I think some of them get a little bit scared off from the idea of anything getting out, but I think they just need to control the way it gets out.
I think there should be celebration in the speculation is kind of what you're getting at. And I agree. Like, the longer you can fan that flame, the better, again,
Right.
from the marketing side. But I have a great relationships with a lot of the teams, managers and owners, and there's some mutual respect you have to have for their wishes, right?
Yeah.
Because they're paying this player that you've worked hard to get them a deal. They've worked very hard and they have plans. And then there's other opportunities where I wish I could say, and I don't agree. Like, I don't always agree with it, But for me, again, with like the authenticity and transparency, I'm trying to be as honest with what I do as I can, and I'm not trying to hurt anybody. And if this is what the company wants and respects, I'll have my opinion. But if at the end of the day, the players signed to work for them, basically, and we have to respect their wishes. I desperately wish we could say Calvin's deal, right?
Right.
I think they actually might announce it after the first of the year, possibly once some other stuff.
Oh.
Okay. They had talked about that. The team had talked about saying it. Maybe they won't, but Kyle Klein, Discmania. Shout out to Austin Montgomery. He's one of the cool people to work with. They do some pretty cool stuff over there, and he's super professional. But they let us say the 6-figure guarantee. For Kyle, and that's all true. And he's gonna have a big year this year, by the way. Yeah, he's gonna have a big year. I think it was a heavy burden on him last year, the contract. Again, you go from what he was at, which was like almost zero,
right,
to what he's going to be doing now. I think he's going to have a huge year. But there's just some nuance to the leaking part, and the problem is like, Trevor, like what you're saying is all right, but the problem is there's those people who just like spew it, and then like wherever it lands, and like that's kind of the problem. Is like the few upset the good upset the bad, or the bad upset the good type thing.
Yeah, no, it's certainly tricky, and I mean, I think it's just you see it. It's tough because right now there's not enough like good sources put in place. You see other professional sports.
Yeah.
There are a set number of people who it's almost become their role to let that stuff go, and they're clearly being fed by agents and by owners and GMs, and they know who to go to. Like Adam Schefter isn't just scraping. Yeah, Woj of the world. Like, these guys aren't just scraping for information. The agents are contacting them. They have sources that are airtight, and it's very professional. It's not. It's basically a news source at this point.
Right.
So I think I'd like to see disc golf get somewhere like that, to where there can be trusted people to help that marketing process, because it's a win-win. It helps market the player and the company, and it helps market the people that get to provide that information. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes in the future. But that's all I've got for you today, Xander. That was fantastic. It was awesome getting that insight from you. I think that you're doing a really cool thing for the sport, and I'm really excited to see how Beacon Sports and the sports agency continues to grow in disc golf and just innovate in the sport and help out the players.
Thanks, man. If I can say one last thing, is it's an honor for me to be able to help the sport and help our players. Like, I tell all of our players, like, this isn't about me. This is about if I can just be a tool to help you change your life and then your family's life. That's a phrase I say a lot. I'll use Mason and Val, for example. They're getting married in a month and a half. And being able to help them with anything is an honor, to know that their kids and their family is going to be impacted by the work we get to do at Beacon. It's pretty cool. That's all I really care about, is just the lasting impact, with Calvin, giving up his engineering degree and taking a risk on disc golf, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that because it's been a while, but he has this amazing UF degree in engineering, and he said, I'm going to go do this hard road. And for him to be where he is now, just to play a small part of that is an honor to me. So, Trevor, thanks for having me on and being able to kind of give some background to that. And I really appreciate it, man, for real.
Yeah, of course. Good talking to you. All right, thanks once again to Xander for joining the show today. I think it was pretty cool getting that behind-the-scenes insight from him, being on that side of the industry of disc golf. Certainly something that I'm super fascinated with, and hopefully you enjoyed hearing about that. I think he could be a cool returning guest as player signings happen, and we can get a little more detail. I think he's just a valuable source in that way. But if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below, and then we'll see you next week with another great episode.